morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking your time this morning to hopefully get a bit of inspiration from us from Ipsos. So we are super excited to see that actually quite a few have signed up for this exciting webinar. So this is the second round of Ipsos Insights webinar we are doing this year. So today on the agenda we have on the taggy headline the road to sustainability, bridging the say-do gap. So of course, quite a bit of a cliffhanger on what you'll see today. And again, we truly believe that we will bring you inspiration today, and hopefully we will also allow you to actually leave in this case it's the computer today, but actually with civil sort of frameworks and tangible things that you can go out and proactively activate in your company. So before we kick off, just a few practicalities. So one, we'll record the session, so you can share it with your peers after. It will be available on our website, and also we will be sharing all the slides, so no need to do screen dumps and so on. We will share all the materials with you. And then another one, as you can see, we're all from home still, so of course we would have loved to have the audience in front of us so we could interact and really be present. However, now we need to do the talking to the camera, but please do put in your questions in the question function. And then what we'll do is that we'll pick them up in the end. We have June who will help us facilitate in the end of the session. So please show your shared passion around this topic on sustainability with us and ask the hard questions. We are definitely up for the challenge. So, of course, we would have loved to be on the stage with the big audience that showed the interest in this session today, but of course we couldn't. So on the virtual stage today, I have brought with me two very intelligent and inspiring women. So I have my colleague from UK, Jessica, and then I have a friend from Orkla as well, Nilüfer. And before we dive into a short introduction of the two, I'll allow them to do that themselves. I'll just briefly put a few words on myself. So I'm the guy on the right-hand side, and as you can see, Corona also have impacted my haircut. So a slightly less hair than what I had when this picture was taken. But I work as a director in Ipsos Denmark, and one of my true passion points is sustainability. So I personally, but also we at Ipsos have been tracking this for many years, and that is of course also why I initiated this webinar on the road to sustainability. So with that being said, I just want to hand over to Nilüfer, just very few words on who you are and your role in Orkla.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Jens. Well, my name is Nilüfer Sahin, and I'm the Chief Communications and Public Affairs Director of the Orkla companies in Denmark. Yeah, and I'm very pleased to be here today to give you a brief introduction to our work with sustainability at Orkla.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Jessica, also, it would be fantastic if you could do a few words.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jessica Long. I am the head of sustainability at Ipsos MORI here in the UK. So I oversee all the work that we do in the environment, ESG, sustainability space. I also work at the global level and support other markets that are working on stuff. I'm joining you from a very sunny London today, and I'm looking forward to sharing the session with you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nilüfer and Jessica. And I look much forward to hear more on your specific context. So I'll do a cliffhanger on what we can expect in a few seconds. So just before we dive into the topic, I just wanted to set the scene very briefly in relation to Ipsos being a global market research company, and so what. But what this really enables us to do is that as we do research in more than 140 markets, we do have more than 5,000 clients, different contexts, so across categories, markets, and end user groups. We are also the most innovative research company in the world. And why I'm stating this, so basically this is the evidence that we actually can help companies navigate this very complex but also emerging topic of sustainability. So at Ipsos, we truly believe that our clients need a partner who actually can produce accurate and relevant information and turn that into an actionable truth. So we help our clients actually establish true understanding of societies, people, and markets. So we believe in the fact that you act better when you're actually sure, and that is also the case for sustainability. What we also see at the Ipsos is, of course, sustainability is important to Ipsos, but it's also very important and increasingly more important to our clients. So what we see is that sustainability actually raises new business questions. So one example could be in relation to understanding the social context. So what is the state of social opinion relevant to my business? It could also be in relation to assessing risk and opportunities. So how should we actually prioritize our sustainability action across our different products and brands and geographies? Another one where probably more sort of tangible in relation to products and so on, it could be around innovation or packaging. So how can we actually develop products and packagings that corresponds to the brand promise and meet our sustainability commitments? And why we get all of these questions, of course, also allow us to do reflections. And I wanted to call out already now that at Ipsos, we do a lot of point of views. So we actually do a lot of syndicated studies and expert curations to actually understand the matter and complexity of sustainability. So on the screen, you just have a few examples of those, and we are more than happy to share. So reach out if you want to read any of these. And this, of course, as we get these many questions, this is also the reason why we're here today and the reason why we have put on the agenda that we have. So a bit on the agenda today. What you can expect from today's content is a mix of the three of us doing some talking. So what we'll do is that we'll start out with Jessica talking about, so when it comes to sustainability, do people actually still care, even despite the COVID situation? Also, when it comes to the industry, what is actually the role of the industry? So you, the companies that are listening in today, what is your role in relation to this? Then we will have Nilüfer on the stage talking about what sustainability is at Orkla and why, but also actual initiatives that they are doing. And then, of course, there was already a cliffhanger in the headline for today's session, but we will be looking at the say-do gap. So and how you as a company can actually actively go in and work with closing that gap. Then we'll round off with what companies and industries can do on a more holistic level, and then of course round off with a Q&A. So I think, Jessica, let's perhaps start from the top. Can you show us some of the evidence that sustainability actually continues to be relevant?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, one of the biggest questions that we got, and it seems to be more widely interested now, but one of the questions that we still get from clients is, do people still care about the environment? And really what I want you to do, or invite you to do, is think back to 2019. And I appreciate that feels like a decade ago at this point. But 2019 was really the year of climate change. We have what's called the Global Trends Survey, which is about a global survey of about 33,000 different people. And that effectively found that the #1 global value that united the world in 2019 was the concern for the environment. And at that point in time, 4 in 5 people believed we were headed for an environmental disaster. So we saw unprecedented concern for the environment across the globe. And 2019 was effectively the year of the climate emergency. That was the word of the year. So obviously 2020, we had thought, all things considered, we had thought that 2020 would be the year of mass scaling that action. Well, 2020 hit, 2020 hit, and there was obviously a pandemic, a recession, social and political unrest. There was so much stuff that had happened that really the environment had slipped from being the #1 most important thing, most important concern for the global public, down to about #6. Now you have to take this with a bit of a grain of salt, because actually concern for the environment has increased since 2019. So the concern for the environment and climate change is at an all-time high. And it's not that the concern has gone down, it's that other more pressing and urgent concerns in terms of the pandemic, cost of living, unemployment, can I feed my children, that type of, am I going to get sick? How am I going to pay for hospital fees? Those things take precedence. And when we actually asked people in terms of their concern versus climate change versus the pandemic, 71% globally feel that climate change is as serious long-term as COVID. And that was right in the middle of the pandemic. So that was about April time when we took that poll. But also people are beginning to see that no crisis really happens in a silo. So people are beginning to make their own organic links between the climate crisis and the pandemic and the world around them. So actually 62% of people around the world globally feel that the coronavirus is linked in some way to the negative impact of human activity on nature and the environment. This directly correlates with those in the Southern Hemisphere that say and claim to have felt the impacts of climate change as well. So you can see by the bright orange that those are the countries that are also feeling the impacts of climate change to a stronger extent than those in the north. And as I mentioned, with the blurring of beginning to see the links between the pandemic and climate change, there's also a blurring of the E and the S of ESG. And for those that aren't familiar with the term, ESG has become basically the catch-all or the very loose framework in which we define sustainability. So it's not just environmental sustainability, it's also social sustainability, things like labor standards or diversity and inclusion, and governance. You know, how are the decision bodies, the representation of the decision bodies at your business being ran? And so the E and the S, you know, what we tend to find is sometimes that a client or a business will be like, well, actually environmental, pursuing the element, the E of the ESG is going to require me to audit my entire supply chain, to divest from fossil fuels, to do all this stuff that's going to cost a lot of money and be a lot of work. I'm just going to do a women campaign or a diversity and inclusion campaign. That's a lot easier. The problem is you can't really pursue those in silo anymore because, as I've mentioned, the public is beginning to make links. We now know that climate change affects women more significantly than men in terms of pregnancy. It also affects people of color. There's things, you know, there's evidence even in the north, you know, that 1,500 people in Britain have actually died due to climate change. There was an article recently in the last two decades, which obviously is minuscule compared to the effects in the southern hemisphere. We also know that climate refugees are beginning to become a problem and a concern for many as well. So it's really important as a business that you're not just focusing on one of these aspects, but you're simultaneously pursuing all three of these. And I also want to kind of myth bust the idea that this is just a youth-led movement, and that's not true at all. The reason why, and then we'll get to this shortly, is that there is a schism between the movement, if you can call it that, because it's such a mass concern. There's a schism between concern in terms of how people address their concerns and where they deem responsibility. So actually, and it's quite surprising to people, but the over 55-year-olds are more likely than the 16 to 24-year-olds, the younger people, to sort their waste, to prioritize seasonal fruits and vegetables, to avoid buying products made in distant countries, to choose products with the least possible packaging. They're more likely to take essentially personal action than younger people to some extent. And the reason why, and that surprises people, is that younger people are increasingly feeling like they want systemic change, that their action is not their level of responsibility is not necessarily just on them, but it's on industry and it is on government to fill that void and to step up. So again, you know, another kind of shocking statistic that we found on Earth Day last year was you think, okay, if concern for climate change set an all-time high and it is increasingly becoming concerning each year on year, surely that would translate into behavior. And you know, as the title of this conference suggests, you know, with this age gap, well, it doesn't. People are no more willing to live sustainably now today than they were 6 years ago, despite their increasing concern. But as I've mentioned, the government and private companies, when we asked people in terms of should they take action versus are they actually taking action, have the biggest discrepancy and have the biggest gap between them. If you look at the citizens and consumers, which is in the middle, they actually feel that they're over performing in this space. They feel that they're doing more than they actually should in this space. So it's no wonder that when we're trying to get them to engage in behavior change, when we're trying to nudge them to do certain things, they're thinking, well, why should I pay more for this product? Why should I do this? Because I'm already doing my part of the responsibility. And also, we're seeing people increasingly take action in their own way against industry and government. So again, it might not be I'm not willing to pay more for something, but I'm willing to sign a petition. I'm willing to boycott a product or brand. I'm willing to vote for a political party. And particularly for young people, I'm willing to take part in a protest. And 52% of citizens have been motivated to carry out at least one action globally. Now that sounds really high, but I ask you to kind of look at some of these definitions as quite loose. So boycotting a product or brand could literally just be I'm going to choose this brand versus the other. Because again, we know that if all things are considered, they'll go for the more sustainable brand so long as other things are equal, because because they're taking action in their own way. And now I want to hand over to Nilüfer. Nilüfer, I know that you at Orkla also see a high level of confusion among consumers in your categories. Can you tell us a bit more about this, as well as what you at Orkla have on the agenda around sustainability?
Yes, of course I can, Jessica. Thank you. Very interesting findings, I would say. But let me start with giving you an overview of what I'm going to present for you. I'll take you through very shortly Orkla as a company, and then our sustainability agenda and ambitions. Then I will present some specific sustainability initiatives that we are very proud of. And lastly, you can of course ask me some questions in the end of the session. Yes, I'll try to. Yeah. Well, if I should start with my first slide, just to give you a very quick overview of our position as a company, I have chosen 4 facts to highlight. We own approximately 300 brands, which we are very proud of labeling with the Orkla corporate brand. We are the leading supplier of branded goods in both the Nordics and the Baltics. Our brand's market position is typically between 30 and 80%, so we are going for a winning position, so to say. And lastly, we are listed on the Oslo Stock Exchange. Well, keeping these facts in mind, I will try to dig a little bit deeper into how our business is organized, because it's a little special, so to say. Our business consists of 6 business areas, and very shortly, Orkla Foods is the largest business area for us. It accounts for around 40% of our operating income. This area contains a quite broad portfolio with key brands for the retail. Then we have Orkla Confectionery and Snacks. In this area, we hold very strong number 1 and 2 positions in different markets. And then we have Orkla Care, which accounts for around 15% only of our operating company or income. And we also have very leading positions within personal care and cleaning products, especially. Then we have Orkla Food Ingredients, which accounts for around 20% of our operating company income. Within this business area, we sell and distribute ingredients primarily to the bakery markets in around 23 countries. And finally, we have our Orkla Consumer and Financial Investments business areas. It consists of 2 different areas. The consumer investment part is consisting of painting tools, basic garment, professional cleaning and restaurant operations, where we invest in the business and the brands, but we are not branding them as Orkla, so to say. Then our investments outside the branded consumer goods business is organized under industrial and financial investments. Yes. And if now that we have been through what Orkla is very shortly, then I will take you through in the rest of my presentation, I will take you through how we work with sustainability at Orkla. While being a very big manufacturer in 2021, with the vision being your friend in the everyday life, we of course acknowledge that we have a certain responsibility, a very big responsibility, of course, to give people some sustainable choices in their everyday lives. When we try to fulfill our mission, which is improving everyday life with sustainable and enjoyable brands, local brands, we use the UN SDGs as a frame, so to say. In particular, goal number 12 is very crucial for our sustainability work. And our companies is on a path, so to say, of transitioning to sustainable production and consumption, for example, by promoting sustainable raw material production, developing recyclable packaging solutions, reducing the climate footprint of our products, and developing products for healthier lifestyle, even though we have this area of confectionery and snacks. So to wrap up, our sustainability work also contribute to other SDGs than only goal number 12. Among these are goal number 5, gender equality, 13, climate action, and 17, partnership for goals. Yes. With our sustainability strategy, we've tried to focus on achieving long-term value creation and profitable growth, of course, since we are a listed company. I have some highlights for you, which are examples of our accomplishments in 2020. And these are only some examples, and we are not perfectly done. We are not there yet, but we do our best every day. Around 50% of all the energies that we use come from renewable sources, and we have some goals to make this number even higher in the coming years. Around 20% of our turnover derives from products defined as most sustainable, and also here we have some goals for increasing this amount. This is an example that we are very proud of. 95% of all our packaging was recyclable in 2020, and our goal is 100% in 2025. So these are just some examples that I wanted to highlight. And just to highlight one specific initiative that we are very proud of. We try at Orkla, we try to understand our consumers, to make it possible for us to develop the right products, but also try to guide our consumers to the best behavior, so to say. So in order for us to understand the consumer's needs and attitudes towards key sustainable topics, we have conducted a survey among 7,000 respondents in the Nordics and in the Baltic countries for the second year in a row, and it is Ipsos who's helping us with this survey. We are calling it Orkla Sustainable Life Barometer. And it is crucial for our sustainability work since it gives us the necessary insight in the consumer's worries and needs. Just to mention one fact, you also mentioned it, Jessica. 6 out of 10 say that they try to buy products that they perceive as being sustainable, yet 65% of all consumers find it hard to tell whether a product is sustainable or not. So we can, as Orkla, do whatever we will with our sustainability work and the sustainability brands, but if we don't help our consumers to try to find the most sustainable choices, then maybe our work is not that effective. So this specific insight is very, very important for us. And we try to guide our consumers where we can. So I'll try to give you some examples on how we try to guide our consumers. Yes. Well, I really enjoyed to present this one example. Naturally, is one of our brands that we are very, very proud of. Not only does the brand hold very high standards when it comes to sustainability, from raw material to packaging, but all our products within this brand is plant-based. And the team behind Naturally, they really live the sustainability dream, so to say. They are all vegan. They only drive in Teslas, and besides developing vegan products, we also use the goodwill from our brand to drive some green political agendas. For example, we try to influence politicians to harmonize the regulation for food of animal origin and vegan food. We have approximately 63,000 followers on Instagram, just to mention an example. And we try to engage them both in the product development and such, but also when we are going to raise an agenda and political agenda, we try to involve them and support us in this work. Naturally's product portfolio increases with product which enables consumers to easily make a sustainable but also at the same time a tasty choice, because we believe that if we make sustainable brands and products which is not tasty, then we will lose the fight, so to say. So Naturally is one of our greatest examples on sustainable brands, so to say. Yes, then I will show you another example. I just need the presentation to react. Yes. Another example is our care division, which is replacing the packaging of 20 supplement brands with recycled and renewable materials. So we have been making a huge investment in our factory to be able to work with our goals within packaging. Very concretely, this new type of packaging is made with a jar consisting of 50 to 100% recycled plastic, and our aim is to reach 100% recycled plastic. So with this initiative, we promote the transition to a circular value chain, so to say, where the packaging can be recycled and used not only twice, but again and again. That is very important for us. Yes. Then I have another example. This is our recently launched brand, Frankful. Frankful is driven by sustainability and focuses on plant-based food, but also other aspects of sustainability. All our Frankful products are manufactured with renewable energy, and more of the products are based on raw materials which would otherwise have gone to waste. So we both focus on CO2 emissions, plant-based, and many other aspects of sustainability, as you also see on the slide. And we have very high expectations to Frankful, and we are looking very much forward to develop it further. Yes. And lastly, during the past few years, we have implemented climate impact labeling on many Orkla brands. This is a very important agenda for us. In Norway, we have launched a labeling based on climate impact scale in 2019. and to further initiate a debate or a broader debate outside our own company, we have gathered representatives from the Norwegian food industry to a dialogue about climate labeling. Sorry. So after a series of workshops together, we have explored the possibility of establishing a common climate labeling across the companies. And we have gathered the results in a report which we have given to the Norwegian authorities, and we really hope that they will work further with this insight that we have achieved. To mention another example, in Sweden, all of our products sold to the business-to-business consumers, such as restaurants and hotels, they contain a climate impact label, so our customers can show their customers the climate impact of the product. In Denmark, we are already labeling many of our products, as I mentioned, but at the same time, we really try to raise an agenda about that it is necessary to achieve a common climate labeling across companies and retail, because it's very hard for the consumers to only look at our brands and see that they are labeled, but in compared to what. So it's very important for us to achieve this common climate labeling, because we find it essential to guide the consumers to make more sustainable choices, and thereby also make our impact with our sustainability work even greater. So those were the words from me, and I'm really looking forward to your questions in the end of the session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nilüfer. And I think really interesting insights that you're pulling out in relation to the fact that consumers, they definitely want to do good stuff, but they're also confused about what is actually the right choice to make. And I will come back to some of your points, in, for example, a common labeling, which is of course something that is has been debated a lot, but also where we see that there is a lot of confusion. So I think now we already have a quite good picture in relation to understanding that already from Jessica stating that consumers actually believe that they do enough. They don't necessarily think that it's on their table to actually, go the last mile, or at least they need someone else to actually help them do the right thing. And I think that is again also confirmed from what Nilüfer is stating, that people actually at least claim to be willing to do the right thing, but they are not necessarily sure about what to do. And I think that perfectly leads us into talking about the say-do gap, which is real. So we can definitely see that. And I believe all of us can recognize in ourselves as well that we might say to our group of friends, family, and so on, that we are a little better than we actually are. But it is actually also a scapegoat of inaction. So I think what we see and what we know is that it all comes down to, it's about knowledge. So how do we actually ensure that we educate and help consumers in the right way so that they have the knowledge to make the right choices? It's also about awareness. So actually creating awareness, but the right awareness. It shouldn't be about, pulling off cheeky marketing campaigns on very small initiatives. So I think, for example, what you're highlighting, Nilüfer, on these new packaging you're doing within dietary supplements, this is actually not something you have been out and done a lot of communication on. So just doing good, helping consumers, are they actually doing the right thing without pushing them too much, but just making it available. It's also about trust, but it's also about misinformation. We need to ensure that is the responsibilities on not only companies, but also the government, to ensure that we provide the right information. And it is difficult because there is media, social media, and so on, and we will come back to that. But in the end, it's really important. So this paradox of choice, so we need to pursue the path of least trade-offs for consumers to effectively engage. So we need to ensure that they are not to make critical trade-offs, because that we as intuitive consumers are not necessarily willing to do. So I'll just speed up slightly to ensure that we can have the last thing from Jessica as well. But what we have done at the Ipsos is that we're working with this framework, so to speak, around what are actually the elements you need to consider to when you're doing your initiatives. So if you want your initiatives to be successful, we see that it's important to consider these 5 elements, and not just one of them, but all of them in an interactive way. So we think that you need to apply a holistic approach to actually understand what your business can do to actually help leverage this consumer behavior, so close the say-do gap. So first of all, we have these 5 elements. So motivation, that is really about ensuring that consumers actually want to do it. So you need to make sure you make it lucrative, so to speak. The ability is all about, are they actually capable of doing it? Then we have the third, which is processing. So is it easy for them to decide? Is it easy for them to implement a certain behavior? Do they actually fully understand the issue that they have at hand? So I think labeling is a great example here where we can actually create more confusion than helping them. Then we have the physical. So do we actually have the right environment to actually encourage or support them to do what we want them to do? And that can be very low practical things, and I'll show you a few examples. Then we have the 5th and the last one. It's about the social, as we call it. So what other people do and value is also really important. So us, or as a consumer, or cultural and social environment, we need to ensure that that is supporting the initiative. So if we have too many screaming on social media to do something different, then we will probably not do what others are trying to make us do. So if we start out with the motivation, so actually, do they want to do it? So do we as consumers want to do it? And what we can see when we actually ask people, so again, this is where we need to be careful, because if you ask people directly, do you want to pay a little more for this? If I as a consumer perceive that this is the right thing to do, then I might be obliged, so to speak, to actually answer, yes, I will be a little more willing to pay. But what we can see here is that when we actually ask them, which of the following would you personally do to reduce the climate change problem? We can see that paying more, so for example, pay extra for recyclable goods or pay more tax, we can see it's only a fraction, so around 10-15% that actually state they're willing to do that. And then have in mind that some will actually just state it and not necessarily wanting to do it. So what we have done is that at Ipsos, we have tried to self-funded, trying to investigate. So for example, in a detergent context or in a t-shirt context, actually trying to, from a behavioral point of view, understand. So if we went out with a detergent that claims sustainability, and the same for the t-shirt. So a plain white t-shirt, one claiming sustainability, one not. We can actually see in the t-shirt case that with all things being equal, including price, shoppers would prefer the sustainable t-shirt. However, if the price is increasing, we see that there is a significant drop. So again, it might be the right thing to do, but people are not necessarily willing to do that trade-off in relation to paying more. Also, in the detergent case, we can see that it performed better when it had the sustainable claims, so resulting in higher penetration scores, but also share of basket and actually perception of product performance. So I think that one is super interesting. If we look at the ability, so are they actually capable of doing it? So I think a really great example here is that, so how can we actually give consumers the ability to pursue a healthy lifestyle, but without them actually indirectly impacting the environment? So I think I'll put here as an example the Simple Feast case. So we are subscribers of Simple Feast in our household, our own, and they do a lot of good things because they give you clear instruction how to sort all of this packaging that you get. However, I also have to say that even though they are doing the best, for example, for us, it's very complicated to actually do all that sorting. So have in mind that you need to interact with consumers and actually test out, is this intuitive enough and is it the right solution? So do people actually do it or just claim that they do it? Another example is the Nespresso initiative that you can return your alu capsules. A really nice example or initiative. However, a lot of people have the struggle of actually finding a physical Nespresso store to return back the capsules. If we look at the processing, so actually it's easy to decide and implement and do I fully understand the issue that we are to do something about. And I think this is where labeling is actually a critical thing. So just in the Danish context, all of you are aware that we have so many different labelings, and I think Denmark is probably one of the better countries in that sense. However, I think just around eco-labeling, we have so many different labels. About supply chain, we have so many different labels in relation to fair trade and so on. The same goes for when we talk about environment versus animal care and about versus organic. So people are, or consumers, the average consumers, and we know that from research, they are confused. What is actually the right thing to do, and how should I navigate this? So I think the ambition from Orkla to setting a standard so everyone is doing the exact same thing, bringing transparency to the consumers, is definitely a route to pursue. If we then look at the fourth one, so physical, does the environment actually encourage behavior change or support consumers to do it? So it can be smaller things. So for example, small nudging. You know, we have these cigarette trash. Also, we have had it at Ipsos. So if you do a small voting, we actually see that people, instead of throwing their leftovers from the cigarette on the street, they actually put it into this can. So that is, of course, a small nudging exercise. It could also be bins with various shaped openings or colors and so on to actually help make it more intuitive where to put your trash. However, there are also more fundamental structural things that are critical and more difficult to change. So what we can see from research is actually that if you live in a flat compared to a traditional low-rise house, we can see that you're actually 50% less you do 50% less recycling, and that is actually because the structure is more difficult. You have less space in your flat, and hence you have less room to actually do the sorting. So some initiatives are more easy, whereas others are more fundamental and structural. Also, this element of social is super important. So what do other people actually do and value also impacts what we think is right. So I think it is about what is actually being spoken about in media. So plastic is something that is really close to all of our hearts because we see it on the really nice bouncy beaches where we would just want to lie. We can see that plastic all over. So that influences what we believe are the most important to make a change. But it's not always necessarily the worst in relation to making an impact on the environment, but it can be staged because this is easier to express in media and so on. And just one example of how hype can actually impact behavior. So when we had this final episode of the Animal Planet with Sir David Attenborough, we could see that in UK there was actually an increase, 55% increase in searches on the internet of how do I recycle. So I think that is just another example how it actually is super impactful. So I think there is so much to do about this, and this was just to provide you a few examples of how you can go about these different elements in the Say-Do Gap. We are more than happy to actually help you try it out in your context. And I think with this, I want to hand over to you to round off, Jessica, in relation to if we take a more holistic point of view from the industry, how can they actually act on this?
Yeah. Thanks, Jens. So I think we've hopefully built the case for you in terms of it's not necessarily if you should act, it's really how. But that's the biggest question that we're getting time and time again from our clients. You know, we know that there's increasing regulatory pressures on a domestic level, on a global level. We know consumer demand is there and that it's at an all-time high, even though it might have other more pressing concerns that are taking priority at the moment. It's still at an all-time high. And we also know that almost every industry we are seeing take action or in some way around this. You know, and it's funny because, and I'll get to this shortly, but the table stakes are shifting almost on a daily basis in terms of what brands are meant to do. So really confusing in terms of, okay, well, what do I do? And I don't want to get it wrong because it has massive reputational, you know, risks. But I also don't want to just stand here and not do anything because, as Jens has walked us through, you know, if my competitor comes in with something that is a relative product that's relatively the same, that has a relatively the same quality and efficacy and price point, but is sustainable, consumers are going to choose that one. So I don't want to be a laggard either. So that's why we've created the sustainability journey model, and it's a 5-step process. And critically, this is just an outline of helping you identify where are you at in your sustainability journey. First and foremost, it's exploration. What is out there? Doing a knowledge audit, doing a competitive landscape. What is the current space and industry that you operate, and also, parallel industries that you can draw inspiration from. What does that look like right now? Number 2, and this is where people get really stuck, we have some suggestions on how to move this forward, is identification. Okay, great. We know our competitors are doing this. We know what are we meant to do? What do we do? Number 3 is execution. How do we actually do it? Number 4, the one that no one seems to actually do, but is so integral to getting this right, is monitoring and evaluation, making sure that what you're doing actually works. And number 5 is communication. How do we tell people? Now, what happens probably 80% of the time is that people go, or our clients go from identification to communication, without doing execution, without doing monitoring and evaluation. The problem with that is, I can tell you firsthand, is that your comms piece will fail if you don't have adequate proof points, and if you are able to articulate what you're doing and the impact it's going to have. So it becomes absolutely critical to get this right. As we're moving on in terms of identification, because obviously that one is a really tricky one, we've also created what's called the brand focus model. So this is, this is what's essentially the brand focus model to help you identify what you actually want to focus on. So there are 4 kind of elements to this. One is address your current environmental impact first and foremost. If you are, hypothetically, if you are a tobacco company and you're focusing on creating, recyclable vaping pods, and that's your innovation and you're passionate about it, until you address the fact that cigarette butts are one of the most polluted items in the world, all your efforts are going to come across as greenwashing, right? So you really need to address, first and foremost, what is your current environmental impact? Number 2 is, what are your consumers' attitudes and behaviors with your product within your industry? As Jens talked about before, when Nestle created the recyclable coffee pods, that great idea, great initiative, and you'd think, oh well, we're coming to we've arranged a pickup so we can come to your house and actually pick them up for you. But still, if you look at the consumer attitude and behavior with that moment, your coffee moment, I have my coffee here, it's one of the most precious moments of your day. The last thing you want to do as a consumer is sit there and be like, okay, well, I can't put these recyclable pods in my recycle bin. I have to put them in a separate area. Then I have to eventually call when I'm ready and arrange a pickup. It's a big ask for people. So again, you have to understand what are their consumer attitudes and behaviors around your specific product in your industry. Also, business ethos and values, though this is a good one, it needs to be driven at a corporate level and not at a brand level. There's so many examples I can give you of executing sustainability initiatives at a brand level, and consumers switch on to the fact that actually this corporate brand and a large majority of them have legacy issues with sustainability. So why should I actually trust that what this brand is doing if their parent brand, if their corporate brand isn't necessarily behind it or has a negative reputation? So it really needs to be driven at a corporate level as much as possible. And you also need to be able to execute it. So if you're, I don't know, if you're in the oil and gas industry and you're telling yourself, and I want to be the next Unilever, well, that is probably not going to happen anytime soon, right? So really, this is also, sustainability focus model is also essentially your right to play model, which again, you can draw that inspiration from other parallel industries, but really focusing on these 4 things, and where it overlaps is where you'll find your sweet spot. And you heard me talk about shifting table stakes before. We call this shields and swords. I love this metaphor. When you think of shields, think of a defensive play, right? Shields are effectively the table stakes of sustainability. This is increasingly becoming, for example, net zero. People think it's really, clients think, oh gosh, we've announced net zero by 2050. We're really ahead of the game. Everybody is now going net zero. And the problem with that is there's also a pushback on carbon offsetting alone. So if you're only going, because there's not enough trees on the planet to offset all the carbon emissions, carbon emissions and the carbon offsetting schemes that industry currently has. There's not enough. So what are you going to do to move that forward? Now, can you just not say, oh, I'm not going to claim net zero at all, I'm not even going to try because everyone else is doing and there's not a USP? No, you need to do that too, because again, that's becoming increasingly a hygiene factor. What are your swords in that space? So you want the defensive play of the table stakes, but also, and the packaging, for example, is increasingly also becoming a defensive play. But swords, you also need, and if you want to be considered a leader in this space, pursue innovations. What's your USP in the space? What are you doing uniquely to drive the conversation, to drive this movement, to drive the impact forward? Now, if you only pursue shields, only to pursue defensive plays, table stakes, hygiene factors, you're going to be seen as lagging in the space, and you're risking that white opportunity, and the competitor can come in and kind of seize the day. If you're only pursuing swords, the problem with that is you have greenwashing potential accusations because you're not doing your due diligence when it comes to hygiene factors and actually your basic expectations of what consumers expect from you. So it's really important to pursue those in tandem. And I want to just give you a couple examples. You don't need to recreate the wheel every time. A lot of people think, okay, actually it's sustainability, I need to go create a big innovation thing, I need to go focus. There's so many different small scale brands and products that are literally designed to be replicated. The phone is one of them. It's a modular phone. It's designed so that you don't have to buy a new smartphone every couple of years. It has fair trade certified gold. They're effectively designed so that another business can come in and replicate that model. They're basically a change brand or a change agency brand. So that is something really huge. Also, it's okay if you make mistakes so long as you own them. And I'll give you a great example. Mistakes, say do that, they should never be an excuse for inaction. Patagonia, the outdoor clothing brand, they are considered basically leaders in this space. They have they were accused of animal rights abuse in 2008 by a German animal rights charity because of the unethical treatment of down and the plucking of geese feathers. So they do it live pluck. If you want to Google it, it's very barbaric. It's really horrible. When they got called out, they did an entire campaign to let all the consumers and the public know that they got it wrong, and that this is, they have a video down there with the Grim Reaper, and it says, do you know where conventional down comes from? And then it says, and this is what we're doing about it. Now we have 100% traceable down. We have QRC codes in our jackets so that you can trace and find exactly what's going on with our supply chain. And all of a sudden, all of their competitors were like, crap, we have to go on, we have to raise our industry standards now, and Patagonia is now seen as one of the most ethical brands out there. So just to recap here, sustainability is the new business imperative. It's not a question of should you act, but how. Industry responsibility to bridge the say-do gap, but not consumers. It must be the path of least trade-offs. We need to follow the sustainability journey, not to be too quick to shout and establish a right to play. And we need to make sure that we pursue shields and swords consistently, because they're always changing. If you make a mistake, you need to own it. So I'll hand over to Jens now to kind of wrap us up for the final bit. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica. And I know, so we are a bit short on time, but just to round off, thank you so much, both Nilüfer and Jessica, for taking the time today. I think it was super inspirational. And I know for the audience also, we have scratched a lot of surface. So please do reach out if you want to discuss this in more depth. We are happy to provide also more examples on how we can activate this in your company. And then I think, of course, just a shout out for our next event around testing your ads is actually a good business. So it will increase your return on investment. We have proof of that, and also your brand equity. And then I think we have 4 minutes left. Let's see if we can get to a few questions. So June, perhaps if there have been any questions from the audience, I think we can do a few, and potentially we will add when we share the document in the Q&A. We will just add our answers to any additional questions.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I received a few questions. One of them is from Alicia. She is asking here, the climate impact change labeling is a wonderful and necessary intervention, but how has Orkla approached educating consumers what the impact means? Is it without having a frame of reference? It is hard to understand if the number is good, bad, neutral. Yeah. So this question is for Nilüfer.
Yes, thank you. It's a very good question, and this particular question is the reason why we try to raise the agenda of climate labeling across companies, at least on a national level, because we know that, of course, we do the climate labeling to show our consumers that we work with lowering the climate emissions of our brands, but it is hard for the consumers to understand in relation to what. And of course, we don't want to blame other companies, other brands of not labeling, but we need a common approach to climate labeling to really help the consumers. So that is what we are working on at Orkla. Very shortly.
Perfect.
Yes. Then the next question is from Julia. She's asking, Jessica, if it's possible, if you can repeat and elaborate your test with sustainable versus non-sustainable. You mentioned something about higher penetrations and other results, but you were speaking a bit fast. Julia would like to hear more about the test, and it was regarding motivation under the say-do gap. I don't know if
I think
you
that
remember this.
Also under my area. So I think
Okay.
probably in relation to the t-shirt and the detergent case. So what we did was actually that, so first of all, we wanted to investigate in some of the big categories where we have clients as well, was actually to understand what is the willingness from consumers to trade off. And what we applied here was our virtual shopping environment. So this is a really nice way for us to actually derive behavior instead of asking behavior. So what we can actually see here is that we can go in and see how do people actually shop based on a traditional shelf, for example, like they were in the store. So without prompting them on this is a new product, this is sustainable, we actually go in and see how do they behave in the shelf. So this is how we can actually derive and understand, will this drive more penetration for you or more trial for you as a company? So it could be the case with I don't know, in Orkla case with Kim's putting in the shelf a new environmental friendly chips or crisp. We can actually see would that be picked among the other products, everything being equal. And then after that, then we can them. Then we can ask them to go on a specific shopping mission. We can ask them, did you notice that there were any labeling? Did this specific price point impact your decision and so on? I'm more than happy to share. So these are cases that are available. So I can share links to those when we share the presentation. With respect to everyone on the call as well, so the clock has hit 10. So we will collect your questions in the chat, and then we'll do a small Q&A elaboration when we share the material. Or alternatively, if anything, we'll just follow up personally with you guys. So I just want to thank you, all of you, for listening in. I really hope this was of inspiration, and we look much forward to see you next time around.